Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. I'll tell you what, if this video can reach 1,000 likes, my next video will be a 10-hour long compilation. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. We are very, very close to 130,000. I think it'd be fun to see if we could hit it before the end of the year. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy the stories with no mid-roll ads, except for the one right after this intro. There won't be any more ads after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. Warning, check your back seat. I wasn't worried about the message when it first popped up. It's one of those things they put in these days to make sure no one leaves a child in a hot car, I guess. It had never shown me that message before, but I figured maybe a passenger had left a purse on the floor or something and it was detecting the weight. There wasn't anything there though. I looked under the seats and everything. Even ran my hands along the back edge to see if there was a wallet or phone stuck in the crack. I didn't think that sort of thing would set off the alarm, but the car was still fairly new, so I couldn't be sure. Regardless, nothing was there. I'd forgotten about it by the end of the next day, honestly, but when I pulled into my driveway and turned off the car, there it was again on my dashboard. I checked the back seat again. Still nothing. I hadn't had any messages from passengers looking for any lost items either. Maybe this was just a thing the car did. Just a general warning to remind drivers to check the back seat every time they got out. If so, it felt counterproductive. If the warning was there every time, people were bound to start ignoring it. It would just become part of the background. Also, I was sure that the car hadn't been doing this for the first several months I'd had it. On the other hand, this was the sort of change they might have pushed through a software update. There could have been some new legislation. Some lobbying group pushing to have this warning on permanently, like the meaningless parental advisory stickers on music. I looked online that night, searching through car forums and news posts for any mentions of this warning. I couldn't find any indication that it was supposed to be happening every time I turned the car off. In fact, it didn't seem to be showing up for anyone else. This problem was only in my car. Clearly it was just a bad sensor. It was probably still under warranty, but in order to get it fixed, I'd still have to leave it at the dealership for a day, and the warranty wasn't going to pay my lost income for the day off. I told myself I could just ignore it. It was just a single line of text. I'd stop noticing it in no time. I was wrong. Every time I turned the car off, that message glared at me like a dire omen. I found myself obsessively checking the back seats every time I got out, even though I knew I'd find nothing. I vacuumed the car until not so much as a crumb remained. I checked the seatbelt latches. Everything was perfect, but the warning still appeared. I tried ignoring it. I averted my eyes when I turned the car off, but I could feel it glowing from the deactivated dash. See the phantom words printed across the darkness of my eyelids. I walked away from the car without looking in the back, telling myself that it was a waste of time and there was nothing to find. I knew I was right, of course, but I found myself wide awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and thinking, what if? I ended up kneeling in the street, in my pajamas, with my phone flashlight on, looking under the seats for something I knew wouldn't be there. The back seat was as empty as always. The warning haunted me constantly. I only saw it when I stopped the car, but I knew it was always coming. I began to watch the back seat constantly, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, more than was safe or reasonable. My passengers noticed. My rating began to dip, with notes making concerns about attentiveness to the road. My tips suffered as well. Finally, I bit the bullet and took the car in to get the sensor fixed. The warning mocked me as I parked in the lot, daring me to go inside without looking. I wanted to. I knew there was nothing there, but if I claimed there was a sensor issue, and they found a bag or a box or some other physical object sitting back there, I'd look like I was too dumb to have just checked the back seats. I knew I had checked it. I had checked it 1,000 times, but I looked once more just to be sure. I explained my problem to the man at the counter. He typed some notes into his computer and said, "Gonna be a few hours until we can get you in." "That's fine," I said. "I'll wait." "You sure you don't have—" he began. I cut him off more emphatically than I intended. "There is nothing in the back seat. I have looked." All right, he said, raising his hands to placate me. "Just trying to save you some time in case." I went to look again after that. I really couldn't have stood being wrong at that point. It was empty. It was always empty. I knew every crevice of that back seat now. There was nothing there. I sat in the waiting room drinking coffee and playing on my phone. I was inexplicably nervous. I couldn't figure out why. It was just a sensor issue. They would find it and fix it. The problem would go away. It was crazy that I'd waited this long, that I'd let it get to me this much. Finally, they called me back up to the front. "Well, we can't find anything wrong with your car," the mechanic said. "What do you mean? There's absolutely nothing in the back seats. I have made very sure of that." "Back seat's clean as a whistle, sure, but we can't get that warning to turn on either. Not without someone in the back seat. It cuts on like it's supposed to with a person back there. But if it's just the driver, it doesn't show." My expression must have been somewhere between disbelief and rage. The mechanic took a step back. "Look, I'll come show you." I calmed myself and followed him out to the garage. He turned on the car while I watched through the window. He let it run for a moment, then turned it off. No message appeared. "See?" he said. "We can replace the part if you want, but since we can't find an issue, it's not going to be covered under warranty, and we've got to take the entire back seat out to do it, so there's going to be a decent labor fee." I ignored him and got into the car. I turned it on and then, with trepidation, turned it back off. For the first time in weeks, no warning appeared. The rush of relief I felt was incredible. I turned the car on and off again several more times. There was no message. The warning was gone. "You happy?" the mechanic asked. "Unbelievably," I said. He shrugged. "Wish they were all this easy." I drove home feeling like I was floating. I hadn't realized how much tension I had been carrying, or how much my car had begun to feel like a prison. The road was broad and open. The day was beautiful. I was free. In my peripheral vision, a light flickered. Something on the passenger side of the car had blinked out. A little orange light I could not remember ever having paid attention to before. I stared sharply at it now, trying to figure out what had been illuminated. It blinked briefly again, or just long enough for me to read it. Passenger airbag off. It stayed on whenever there was no one in the front passenger seat. It was off now. The final short blink could have been anything. It could have been an LED failing, a sensor breaking, any of 1,000 electrical glitches. Or it could have been something settling itself into the passenger seat. I pulled over to the side of the road. I left the car running when I got out. I did not look back as I walked away. There was no point. I knew there was nothing in the back seat anymore. I never went back for the car. The police called a few days later. They'd found my vehicle, they said. Some kids had taken it out joyriding. It was in bad shape. So were the kids. They were reviewing the dashcam footage, but did I want a copy for my insurance? I shouldn't have watched it. I knew that before I ever put the thumb drive in my computer. But I had to know. They were laughing at first, whooping and hollering as they sped away down the street, all clearly having fun at first. Pretty soon, though, One of them starts cautioning the driver to slow down. The panic starts then, screaming that the pedals don't work, the wheels won't turn, the doors won't open. All the while, the speed on the display is creeping higher and higher. It ends as you'd expect. I'm sure there'll be questions about why I left my car with the keys in it, whether I knew something was wrong. I suppose the clean bill of health I got from the dealership that day will be useful in proving my innocence. I'm not worried about that right now, though. My Ring doorbell is notifying me that there's someone on my front porch. But the camera shows nothing at all. Ever find yourself jobless, angry, and fed up? If not, I envy your life. Unfortunately, that's the state I find myself in. Worked at a grocery store for about a decade. Customer decided to get rough with one of the other employees over some baby formula. One punch later, they're getting a couple $100 in gift certificates not to sue, and I'm out the door. I'd say funny how life works, but there's nothing funny about my situation. So here I sit, combing through Reddit for some horror to take my mind off my impending financial doom, watching 80s slasher films when that gets old, and rereading my Stephen King collection, of course. It'd be a good life if I wasn't sneaking ever closer to starvation. One day, though, I get a chat request. I accept it and see a phone number. My first thought is that it's for some kind of ARG. So, wallowing in shame, worry, and boredom, I give it a call. Thank you for calling Project Insomnia. How may I direct your call? An upbeat female voice says. Got sent this number on Reddit, wondering what everything is about. I reply. Good for you. I'll connect your call. The voice replies. After a few minutes of hold music, that's exactly as you'd expect, someone answers. Nathan, glad you decided to call. I've heard you're looking for employment and enjoy horror. Am I correct? A professional-sounding man says. I'm a little weirded out. I'm not the type to use my name. Of course that isn't my name but a stand-in, but I'm sure you all know that. Online much. And I certainly haven't been posting about my financial state. Till this, anyway. But people who run ARGs can get really into the weeds, so I don't think much of it. Right on both accounts. Why? I reply. We have an opportunity for you. 2 weeks of your time, using your skills. $20K. The voice says simply. God, I could use that money in real life, but hey, this will keep my mind off of things while I wait for some answers on resumes. Sign me up, I answer. Nathan, I think you're misunderstanding. We're not running any kind of game. I'm offering you money for your time. The voice sounds mildly annoyed. Really? I'll bite. What's the catch? Is this some kind of MLM pyramid scheme? What's going on? I ask. Details can be given in person. I'll send you a location. We can meet and see if you feel the job is a good fit. I'd request you bring a suitcase in case you feel like taking us up on our offer. There are many other people who have been chosen, and time is a factor, the voice explains. I get some mild BS vibes from his statements, but it's not like I have a full schedule. A couple of days later, I find myself in a small diner a couple towns over, sitting with a man in a plain black suit. He doesn't seem nervous, but there's a vigilance in his eyes, like he's used to watching out for things. Glad to see you've made it. You wouldn't believe how hard it is to get people to believe we're paying 20 grand, the man in front of me says. I would. I'm waiting for the part where you tell me it's split up over a decade and requires a 5K deposit. Before that, could I know who I'm talking to? I ask. You can call me Adrian, and I assure you what I'm offering is real. By the end of this meeting, if you so choose, I'll have the money in your account, is Adrian's reply. There's some silence. A waitress comes over. Anything I can get for you two? The middle-aged lady asks. Coffee for myself and a clubhouse sandwich with fries for my friend, Adrian replies. I'm not shocked that he knew what I'd order, more amused. Whoever these people are, they've dug into me. You're trying really hard to cultivate a mysterious aura. It's working though, so what's the job? I say. Simple really. We want you to watch horror, lots of it, for extended periods of time, and give your observations, Adrian says. Is this some kind of AI training BS? I'm not that desperate, I reply. No, Nathan, you will be watching real people, nothing artificial about it. But I know the question you're really asking. Why are we offering you so much money for something you do every day? Will you hope to get a call back from the sanitation office or a McDonald's? The answer is not going to be as exciting as you think. Your accommodations are going to be rather Spartan, somewhere between a small apartment and a prison cell. We need secrecy and a high volume of participants, hence the arrangement, Adrian explains. My food comes. I feel like I'm under a microscope as I eat, Adrian's eyes dissecting my every movement. So this is some kind of test run, I'm guessing. Halloween-themed attraction at an amusement park? You're paying for me to shut up about it more than anything, I question. Adrian gives a half shrug. Close enough for government work. So what's the verdict? I've got 2 more people I have to see tonight, Adrian offers, sliding over a small stack of papers and a pen. I read through the contract, smirking a little. This is some McCaney Manor stuff here, Aid. Like, this part about consenting to methods of encouragement that may lead to physical harm. You can't sign away your rights against assault. So clearly you guys aren't going to be knocking out anyone's teeth. Adrian smiles. No one in organization has any intent to put hands on you. Astute observation, though. If you want my opinion, remove those parts. Just let people imagine what bad things could happen. But all the real bits seem in order. So what about my money? I ask. The grin Adrian gives me should have been my warning sign, but I was too busy getting a notification of $20,000 in my nearly empty bank account. Jesus, Murphy. You weren't kidding, were you? It's like someone tried to turn a submarine brig into a bachelor pad, I say, looking around the small room. There's a bed with thin sheets, a large desk with a few dozen monitors, and that's about it. Enough room to maybe do some push-ups, but nothing more. One thing I notice right off the bat is how the monitors are constructed. Thick, textured plastic leads to the wall, locking each of them in place. They're hardwired into the electrical system, the plugs being reinforced and grounded behind the wall. There's a small vent in the ceiling doing its damnedest to minimize the musty odor of the place. The toilet is what I'd expect, stainless steel and industrial, but at least it's clean. The door gives me pause, thick, steel, and with a slot in the middle. If the project takes off, maybe we will look into making the workspaces more comfortable, Adrian offers. Not like you could make it any less so. But hey, $20K makes it seem a lot bigger than it is, am I right? I reply. Meals are served 3 times a day. We've not found any dietary restrictions in your research on you, but if you have any, feel free to let us know. You may keep your cellular device, but usage in most cases will be seen as contrary to the rules outlined in the contract. Once daily, you will be expected to give a report on what you're seeing on the monitors. Attention to detail is key, Adrian explains. Okay, so this is kind of like a night trap meets escape room situation, I say, sitting down in a small computer chair, looking at the bank of various monitors. There's that attention to detail we're looking for. Watch the monitors, Nathan, Adrian says, closing the steel door. Want to know what I'm feeling? Joy. Yeah, everything is grimy and eerie as hell, but it's supposed to be. I'm alpha testing something or other. An immersive horror game, maybe. I light up a cigarette and immediately notice two things. The first is that all of the monitors are showing 3 different places. About a half-dozen screens apiece, give or take. The second is just how varied these screens are. Some are crystal clear, some are antiques, but all are behind a layer of almost imperceptible bulletproof glass. How do I know it's bulletproof glass? I don't, but it's clear. I can't scratch it, and I can't leave a scorch mark on it. Most of the monitors are dull. A fast food place, a gas station, and the inside of a house. After a while, though, someone comes home. A nice-looking lady, early 30s or so, smartly dressed and coming home late at night. I've been watching paint dry for hours. I'm instantly drawn to anything resembling action. What the hell am I doing here? I say, frustrated as I watch her through an impeccable screen. The house is dark. Her kitchen lights obscure the background. Shadows play like feral cats in her McMansion. I yawn, wondering when dinner is, or for that matter, what time it is. Then I see it on one of the older monitors. Could just be glitches from the ancient tech, but I swear it's a pair of eyes. Subtle, well done. It makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But as quickly as they appear, they're gone. The woman turns, looking to where the apparition once was. As she does, her fridge door closes. Whether of its own accord or something else is unclear. Nice, I say, complimenting the scare. Theater or not, my heart's racing. Boring hours flew by like water in a dangerous lake. I'm brought something they assure me is dinner. Meatloaf, heavy on the loaf, nearly green. Green beans and cornbread I debate on keeping to whittle. At least the coffee is decent, and given to me in a 2-liter carafe. I look away when the woman starts changing. I'm starting to think this is live improv, and meeting someone after I've seen them naked seems gross. One lamp on the desk lights her, as she places modest jewelry in expensive cases. There's a noise, a keening wail, and the woman turns around seeing nothing. We're in the same boat. That is, until I look at a smaller, black and white monitor. Standing in front of the woman is a rotten, lanky specter, torn asunder and enraged. Right in front of you, I scream, but she can't hear me. The objects in the room rattle. It's enough to scare the wits back into the woman. She bolts to her bedroom door. The thing, that mournful thing, grabs her by the arm. A sleeve of the woman's housecoat crumbles, the flesh beneath it beginning to wither. She tries to pull free, but the grip of the specter is immovable. She hammers down a hand, and somehow after 3 frantic blows, the spirit lets go, growling in rage. The woman gets distance between herself and the ghost, but the undead doesn't bother to move. Small furniture flies like it's been caught in a tornado. Windows rattle and fracture, sending broken glass and waves onto the carpet. The woman takes a wrong step, lacerating her foot. She holds on to a banister for support. The ghost laughs. The woman rises as if she's been picked up by one leg. She's screaming now, begging. Blood pours from her torn foot into her eyes. The spirit dangles her in midair. Her arms begin to twist and warp, snapping and breaking. I try to cover the speaker, but it's no use. I hear her pain. For a moment she's still. Then, defenseless, she falls. The feed on that set of monitors cuts out, and I'm jarred back to reality, sweat beading, nails digging into the armrests of the cheap chair. Well done, guys. I'm not usually one for ghost stories, but that was damn near worth the time, I say to whoever is keeping tabs on me. A few more hours of staring at the screens and there's a loud klaxon, jarring in the small room. The monitors shut off and a pre-recorded voice says, "Now begins your 10-hour rest period." There's a handful of reasons I have trouble falling asleep, not the least of which is the amount of coffee I've had. A close second, though, are those noises. I've watched everything from Psycho, great, to a Serbian film, horrible, and not once has audio stuck with me so much. I'm woken by that same eardrum-punching tone. Before I can brush the sleep from my eyes, a breakfast is shoved through the slot in the door. It's about as well made as dinner was. More coffee, and half a cigarette later, I hear a voice from an on-scene speaker. "Hey, Nathan," the voice says. I can hear paper rustling. "That's me," I reply. "Hi, call me Percy. I'll be asking you a few questions about what you watched the previous day. If you have any for me, by all means let me know." The voice is level, friendly. "I was expecting Adrian, to be honest," I say. Percy laughs. This is a little below his pay grade. I'm just a guy working a job, like yourself. But nicer digs. I'm also not making 2K a day. I smile. "So what do you want to know?" I ask. "Well, I'd like for you to give me your overall impression of what you've seen, with particular attention to things that stood out, or may have seemed odd," Percy replies. "The format is neat. You'd think I'd get obnoxious, but those actors you hired, and those effects, make it worthwhile." I'd cut down a little on the dead air, though. The ghost was scary, especially the wounding around the face. Unique is probably the right word. The sound effects blew me away. One thing, though. Why did the ghost let go when that lady hit her? Didn't make any sense. Maybe if she hit it with a Bible or something, but as is, I don't know. Kind of killed the vibe. Seemed a little lazy or silly. I explain. "Good catch, Nate. I'll have the higher-ups take a look into that. Not a bad way to earn a few grand, eh?" Percy replies. "It'd be better if I wasn't hanging around with the ghosts of my own farts. That vent isn't doing a damn thing," I joke. The next 3 days go by in much of the same way. I scan the monitors till something spooky happens, and do my best to point all the plot holes and stupid things I find. Not that there's much to pick apart. The variety alone makes things worthwhile. I'm seeing ghosts, demons, a couple of slasher villain types, and a handful of different creatures. Despite the sponge baths and stale air, it's honestly a dream job. But I wouldn't be posting here if the dream didn't turn into a nightmare. Day 5 shows me what this place is really about. Breakfast comes, the same as always. A dish I dub Greg's. Due to their color and my love for a good port matcha, I answer some questions on the last thing I watched. Some kind of monster fight club. Seemed way too action-oriented. More like fantasy than horror, really. And get ready for another day. My selection consists of an empty barn, a deep forest, and... Adrian, I said in the interview, no AI BS. I'm out. Open the door, and if you want your 20K back, you can see me in court. I'm not going to be part of the downfall of art, I say. No reply. My issue is, I'm recognizing one of the places I'm watching on a set of monitors. Kumar's Comics. Now, I'm not much of a geek, but I've been known to buy a comic or two, and while I'm not in there every day, I know the owners well enough. Kumar and Jasprit Patel. A little over middle-aged, and the kind of folks that truly love what they do. There is no way, other than some kind of generative special effects, I'm watching them. Guys, I'm serious, I say. I try to sound enraged, but I hear the anxiety in my voice. It's 20K, I whisper to myself, justifying tossing my artistic morals to the wind. The more I watch, the more people I know I see, the more I'm actually impressed. I hate saying anything good about AI, but if I didn't know better, I'd swear I was actually watching cameras hidden in the shop. The longer I watch, the more I think that this can't just be some kind of special effect. I'd try to shake the thought, but as the hours slowly tick by, it's all I can think about. But what can I do? How could I prove things one way or another? My hand starts to move towards my phone, a plan forming. The second I grab it, a loudspeaker, distorted voice hits me like a slap in the face. Nathan, do you know much about firing squads? Adrian says, his voice calm. What? No, why? I stutter. In any firing squad, one man is given a rifle loaded with a blank. None of them know who. The reason why is that certain actions carry a weight, one that's too heavy to carry for most. No matter how noble the intention, it leaves that sliver of doubt that maybe you didn't really do anything. It's how most members of a firing squad sleep at night. If you make that phone call, it's only going to make things harder for you. Cling to that doubt. Cling to it like a life raft, Adrian explains. What are you saying? I ask, panicked. As little as possible for your sake, and I have to remind you, using your device to communicate is against the rules of your contract and will be dealt with. Adrian threatens. I feel like I'm on the edge of a cliff. On one hand, I know this is all just some game. Spooking me out is the point. But on the other, a lot of things aren't adding up. I dial the number, I hear the ring echo through the monitors. My heart drops. I feel sick to my stomach. My phone disconnects. When I look down, I don't even see the "for emergency calls only" prompt. Just a string of strange, illegible characters. I hear Adrian sigh, then the speaker cuts out. A few seconds later, the industrial toilet/sink combination starts spewing water. It goes on for minutes, soaking everything in the room and leaving about 3 inches of standing water. I'm shivering, scared, and I understand how truly screwed I am. Watch the monitors, Nathan. You may not understand, but you're helping to save a life as we know it. Adrian demands. What else can I do? The day slowly trickles by. Every customer, every shadow makes my heart stop. Around 11 p.m., Kumar and Jasprit begin to close down the shop. I think maybe they're safe. Is this just another of the feeds where nothing happens? No one likes being proven wrong, myself included. The door wasn't locked. A short, stocky man in a dragging raincoat and beat-up fedora walks in. Sorry, buddy, store's closed. Open up bright and early tomorrow, though, Kumar says. The man ignores him. The stranger's faded plaid coat catches on a set of action figures, knocking them over. Sir, show a little more care, please, Jasprit says. Nicer than necessary. The stranger laughs, mockingly. I catch an angle of his face, pale, rotund, and full of small lesions. They look almost like burns, but as he grins I see it. Each of his teeth are small clusters of wire. Get out! Run! I scream at the screen, but of course they can't hear me. I know what this guy is, or at the very least what he's capable of. I can't just sit here. But what choice do I have? Yesterday, I'd probably said he's the worst thing I've seen. He's not really scary, and his gimmick seems tacky. The thought makes me sick to my stomach. The callousness I've viewed people's trauma with. I vomit. The noise it makes in the standing water makes me retch a second time. Okay, Dick Tracy. Time to get out of my store before I call the cops. You have 10 seconds, Kumar says in a commanding tone. The stranger snickers again, then turns to Kumar and his wife. I don't speak Hindi, but the squat man does. What he says shocks Kumar enough. He picks up the phone and dials 911. Of course, there's no dial tone. The lights flicker, then dim, then go out completely. Kumar and Jaspreet use their phones as a light, trying to find their way to the door. They reach it, but it doesn't budge. Kumar begins to rattle the door. There's an electric, arcing sound. Then above them is a twisted grin made of arching wire. I don't catch most of the violence. By the time the stranger sinks his teeth into Kumar, they both dropped their phones. The feed cuts out. I feel lightheaded, like nothing is real. But it is. All of it. I just watch people I know get killed by a C-list urban legend. I don't sleep. By the time I hear Percy, I'm staring angrily at a wall. Hey, I've got about 10 seconds to talk. You need to think about this like getting drafted into a world war. It sucks. It's going to change you. But it's for the fate of the world, Percy says, his voice panicked. Why the hell are you doing this? Why are you killing people? I scream. We're not. Every place you're watching is the result of months of research. And even then, it doesn't always pan out. But the higher-ups, they don't mess around. Do your time, get out. Don't let anything get in the way of that, Percy pleads. From then on out, things don't feel interesting or exciting. Knowing what I know, the violence hits home. It messes with my head. The worst are the stupid ones. The kind of things I'd share with my friends for the sole purpose of mocking the writer. Something about a creature or spirit that can be accurately described as cringeworthy. Taking someone's life is shocking and dismal. Then there's the cell itself. After the first day of standing, water spots of mold and veins of mildew start to develop on the walls. A couple of days after that, I've got a cough that won't quit. It's my second concern beyond what I believe is a case of trench foot. Things are miserable. Torture, really. By day 10, it's all I can do to focus on the screens in front of me. I'm running a fever. One of my toes is turning a foul shade of green. That morning's breakfast comes with a familiar-looking stack of papers. I laugh, then cough. I see blood in the phlegm. It's a contract. Another 2 weeks of my life to have the water drained and some antibiotics. Of course, there's another 20K in it for me. But at this point, I'd burn the goddamn money just to get out of here. But truth be told, I don't know if I'm going to last another 4 days without medical attention, and air without spores in it. I sign. Of course I do. It's not like I have a choice. If it was a case of being shot, maybe I'd be brave enough to face the music instead. But the thought of dying slow, infected death in this sodden cell terrifies me. There's no happy ending here. I'm still in this cell. Day 13, in fact. The first day since the 5th I've seen a familiar place. My cell. It sits, perched in a corner of the room, looking down at me from the ceiling. I can't see it when I look up, but on an old, green-tinted monitor it lurks. I can't make out much of it besides what I think is a rusted old army helmet. Its long brass teeth reflect the scant light in the cell. Water is flooding my prison as I finish typing this. A punishment for reaching out to all of you. This is my cry for help. My scream to the void to try and figure out some way out of my situation. But this is also my warning. Something is happening in the world. Something big and chaotic, and worse than anything we've seen before. Rules are breaking, logic is failing, things aren't what they seem, and someone, somewhere out there, is keeping an eye on all the Reddit threads and YouTube comments, looking for people that know what they're looking for. Those of us who live and breathe urban legends and ghost stories. Watch your back, guys. I don't know what else to say. My name is Celine. The title of this post is something I have whispered to myself for over a decade, but never dared to type out. People worry about your mental health when you talk about ghosts. They worry even more when you tell them you are living with one. But I'm 36 now. I'm established, I'm stable, and I'm far enough away from the event to look at it clearly. I need to get this down because I looked at her this morning. Really looked at her. And I realized the truth is undeniable. To understand what I have now, you have to understand what I lost. It started 15 years ago. I was 21, living in a cramped, drafty apartment in Montreal, with the love of my life, Marianne. We were young, stupidly in love, and perpetually broke. Marianne was everything I wasn't. I was quiet, anxious, and prone to overthinking. Marianne was a firecracker. She was loud, she laughed with her whole chest, and she had the most piercing, impossible blue eyes I have ever seen on a human being. She was my anchor, until the night I let her drive away angry. The argument was stupid. It's the cliché of every tragedy, isn't it? We fought over money. We were short on rent, and she had spent a little extra on concert tickets for my birthday. I should have been grateful. Instead, I yelled. I told her she was irresponsible. I told her she didn't take our future seriously. The last words I said to her were, "Just get out. I can't look at you right now." So she did. She grabbed her keys, her eyes swimming with tears that made that blue look like a stormy ocean, and she slammed the door. 2 hours later, the police were knocking. Black ice on the hallway. She had lost control of our beat-up Honda and went over the guardrail. She died on impact. The weeks following the funeral are a blur of gray. I don't remember eating. I don't remember sleeping, really. I just remember laying in our bed, staring at the empty spot beside me, smelling the fading scent of her vanilla shampoo on the pillowcase. The guilt was a physical weight. It sat on my chest like an anvil. I had killed her. I convinced myself of that. If I hadn't yelled, if I hadn't kicked her out, she would be safe in bed. I was a murderer. That was when the activity started. At first, I welcomed it. It began small. I would come home from my waitressing job to find things displaced. A picture frame turned face down. The cabinet doors in the kitchen wide open. The temperature in the apartment would plummet, leaving my breath visible in the air despite the radiator clanking away at full blast. My grieving mind didn't register fear. It registered hope. "Marianne?" I would whisper into the darkness. "Is that you?" I assumed she was back. I assumed she wanted to tell me she was okay, but the atmosphere in the apartment wasn't comforting. It was heavy. It felt oppressive, like the air pressure before a tornado. 3 weeks after the funeral, the activity shifted from passive to aggressive. I was in the kitchen making tea. I had the kettle on the stove. Suddenly, the burner dial snapped from low to high on its own. The gas flared up with a whoosh. I jumped back, my heart hammering. I reached out to turn it off, and a mug from the drying rack flew off the counter. It didn't just fall, it was thrown. It shattered against the wall inches from my head. I stood there, shards of ceramic at my feet, trembling. "Marianne?" I cried out, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I thought it was her anger. I thought she was trapped here. furious at me for the way we left things. I deserved it, I told myself. She wanted to throw things. Let her. I deserved every bit of it. But it got worse. The nights became unbearable. I would wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of heavy, wet breathing right next to my ear. Not the soft breath of a sleeping partner, but a raspy, guttural sound. When I reached for the lamp, the bulb would pop with a deafening crack, plunging me back into darkness. Shadows began to pool in the corners of the room, taller and darker than they should have been. They seemed to stretch toward the bed. I stopped sleeping. I became a ghost of myself, dark circles under my eyes, shaking through my shifts at work. The culmination happened on a Tuesday in November. It was a month after the accident. I was lying in bed, fully dressed, because I was too terrified to change into pajamas anymore. I was staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Then the temperature dropped. It wasn't gradual. It was instant. The air went freezing cold, so sharp it hurt my nose to inhale. I squeezed my eyes shut. "I'm sorry, Marianne," I whispered. My mantra of guilt. Something grabbed my ankles. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a vice grip, strong and painful, like two bands of steel clamping down on my bones. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I tried to kick, but my legs wouldn't move. With a violent jerk, I was ripped down the mattress. I screamed, I clawed at the sheets, desperate for purchase, but the fabric just bunched in my hands. I was dragged off the foot of the bed, my hips slamming hard onto the hardwood floor. The grip didn't let go. I was being pulled across the floor of the bedroom, toward the open closet door. The closet was a gaping maw of darkness. "Marianne, stop, please!" I shrieked. I grabbed the leg of the heavy oak dresser as I slid past. The friction burned my palms, but I held on. The force pulling my legs was immense, threatening to dislocate my hips. I was sobbing, hysterical, kicking wildly with my feet against empty air. Suddenly, the grip vanished. I didn't wait. I scrambled up, scrambled into the corner of the room and curled into a ball, hyperventilating. I stayed there until dawn broke, watching the closet, waiting for her to come back and finish me. I looked at my ankles in the morning light. There were bruises, distinct, finger-shaped bruises, but they weren't the size of Marianne's hands. Marianne had small, delicate hands. These marks were large. The fingers were too long. A cold realization settled in my gut. That wasn't Marianne. Marianne had a temper, yes. She could be fiery, but she was never cruel. She would never hurt me physically. She loved me. Even in our worst moments, she loved me. Whatever was in my apartment, whatever was dragging me toward the dark, wasn't the woman I loved. It was something else. Something that fed on misery. And I was an all-you-can-eat buffet. I was terrified to go back to the apartment, but I had nowhere else to go. I spent the day walking around the city, freezing in the November wind, dreading the sunset. That evening, as I approached the front steps of my building, I saw something sitting near the communal trash cans. It was a cat. It wasn't scrounging for food, and it wasn't fleeing from the noise of the street. It was sitting perfectly still, its tail wrapped neatly around its paws, watching me. It was a calico, mostly white with patches of orange and black. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The cat stood up and let out a soft merp sound. It walked right up to me, winding through my legs, rubbing its cheeks against my shins. I reached down automatically to pet it. The fur was soft, surprisingly clean for a stray. Then the cat looked up at me. The breath caught in my throat. The eyes, they were blue. Not the greenish yellow or amber typical of cats. They were a deep, striking, impossible electric blue. They were her eyes. I fell to my knees on the sidewalk, ignoring the cold concrete. I stared at the cat, and the cat stared back with an intelligence that felt jarring. It bumped its forehead against my nose, purring, a sound like a small engine. "Hey," I whispered, my voice trembling. The cat didn't run away. When I stood up and unlocked the front door of the building, the cat trotted inside ahead of me, as if it owned the place. I hesitated, then followed. It climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment door and sat there, waiting for me to turn the key. I opened the door. Usually the dread would hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. The heavy, malicious atmosphere. The cat walked in first. It strutted into the center of the living room, sat down and let out a long, low hiss. It wasn't hissing at me. It was staring at the dark hallway leading to the bedroom. The fur along its spine stood up in a rigid ridge. I stood by the door paralyzed. The cat held its ground. It let out a growl that sounded too deep for its small body. Then it strode forward, into the hallway, into the bedroom. I heard a thump like something heavy falling, and then silence. The cat came trotting back out a moment later, its tail held high, looking relaxed. It walked over to the couch, Marianne's favorite spot, jumped up, curled into a ball, and went to sleep. For the first time in a month, the apartment felt empty, but in a good way. The heavy pressure was gone. I didn't kick the cat out. I named her Marianne. It felt sacrilegious to anyone else, I'm sure, but it felt like the only option to me. Things changed after Marianne the cat moved in. The supernatural activity didn't stop immediately, but it changed. It felt like a war being waged. But I was no longer the soldier. I was the civilian being protected. One night, I was watching TV. The air grew cold again. The familiar scent of ozone and rot began to creep in. I tensed up, clutching a pillow. Marianne, who had been dozing on my lap, instantly woke up. She leaped off the couch and stood in the center of the room. She stared at an empty corner near the ceiling, her eyes pinned back flat against her skull. She let out a scream, that specific, yowling caterwaul that cats make when they are about to fight. The lights flickered. The TV turned itself off. Marianne launched herself at the wall. She literally ran halfway up the drywall, claws out, swiping at the empty air. I saw, and I swear this is true, a dark, misty shape recoil from her. She landed on her feet and hissed again, spitting, her blue eyes blazing. The cold air dissipated instantly. The TV flickered back on. Marianne sat down, licked her paw, and looked at me as if to say, "It's handled." This happened a few more times over the next month. Whatever that thing was, whatever dark parasite had latched onto my grief, it was trying to come back, and every time, Marianne was there. She was a sentinel. She slept on the pillow next to my head every single night. If I shifted in a nightmare, she would place a paw on my cheek, grounding me. I started to notice things about her behavior, things that made the hair stand on my arms. My human girlfriend Marianne had a very specific hate for olives. If a pizza came with olives, she would pick them off with surgical precision and stack them in a pyramid on a napkin. One night, I ordered a supreme pizza. I was eating at the coffee table. The cat jumped up. She sniffed a slice. She delicately used her claw to hook an olive, fling it off the pizza onto the table, and then nudged it away with her nose. She did this to every olive on the slice before trying to steal a piece of the pepperoni. I just stared at her. "Really?" I asked. She blinked slowly. Marianne the human also had a habit of tapping her fingers when she was impatient. The cat, when waiting for me to fill the food bowl, would tap her left paw rhythmically against the floor tiles. Tap, tap, tap. She didn't like cat toys. I bought feathers, laser pointers, fake mice. She looked at them with disdain, but she loved watching reality TV. She would sit on the back of the couch, eyes glued to the screen, head moving back and forth as the people argued. Human Marianne used to say it was her trashy, guilty pleasure. Slowly the fear in my life evaporated. The dark entity gave up. It couldn't get past the guard dog, or rather, the guard cat. By the time spring arrived, the apartment was just an apartment again, but I was never alone. I talked to her. I know that's what crazy cat ladies do, but this was different. I told her about my day. I told her I was sorry about the fight. I told her I loved her. Whenever I apologized for the accident, for the argument, she would butt her head against my mouth to silence me. She would purr so loudly it rattled her ribs. It was forgiveness. I knew it. Life went on. I moved out of that apartment 2 years later. Marianne came with me, obviously. I went back to school. I got a degree. I started a career in graphic design. I dated a few people, though it never really worked out. It's hard to bring someone home when you feel like your dead ex is judging them from the top of the cat tree. And that brings us to today. I was sitting on my porch this morning drinking coffee. Marianne was sunning herself on the railing. I realized the date, October 14th. It has been exactly 15 years since the accident. It has been 15 years, minus 3 weeks since I found the cat. I looked at her. 15 years is a long time for a cat. A cat at 15 is usually slowing down. They have gray hairs around their muzzle. Their eyes get cloudy with cataracts. They sleep 20 hours a day. They have trouble jumping onto high surfaces. Marianne looks exactly the same as the day I found her. I mean exactly. Her fur is pristine, silky, and vibrant. There is not a single white hair on her black and orange patches. Her eyes are that same crystal, piercing electric blue, clear as the summer sky. She jumped from the porch railing to the roof of the garage this morning, a 6-foot vertical leap, to chase a squirrel. She moves with the agility of a kitten. She eats with the appetite of a lion. I took her to the vet last week for a checkup. The vet, a new guy, looked at her chart. Born roughly 15 years ago? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Yes, I said. I found her then. He examined her. He checked her teeth, her heart, her joints. He looked perplexed. He took an x-ray just to check for arthritis. This is bizarre, he told me, showing me the scan. Her bone density, her teeth. If you didn't tell me she was 15, I'd say this cat is maybe 2 years old, maximum. There's zero sign of aging. Absolutely none. I nodded. I wasn't surprised. I came home and looked at old photos. I found a picture of human Marianne from her 20th birthday. She's laughing, looking at the camera. The look in her eyes is defiance and joy mixed together. Then I looked at the cat, sitting on my desk, watching me write this. I don't think she's a cat. I mean, she is a cat biologically, I suppose. But the spirit inside, the thing looking out through those blue eyes, the entity that attacked me 15 years ago wanted to hurt me. It was drawn to my guilt, but Marianne, she fought it off. She came back. She found a vessel that would let her stay. I've read about this kind of thing. Reincarnation, possession, spiritual attachment. Usually spirits move on. They fade, or if they stay in an animal, the animal eventually ages and dies. But she isn't aging. She isn't leaving. I stroked her head a few minutes ago, running my thumb over her ears. I whispered, "You're not going anywhere, are you?" She let out a short, sharp meow. It sounded like no. She bit my thumb gently, another thing human Marianne used to do when she was being playful, and began to lick my hand with her sandpaper tongue. I'm not scared. I should be, probably. It defies every law of nature. I'm living with a creature that is effectively immortal. inhabited by my dead girlfriend who refuses to cross over because she thinks I can't handle myself alone. And the honest truth? She's probably right. She's looking at me right now. She wants me to stop typing. She's tapping her left paw on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. I guess I better go. She hates to be ignored. It is just a kid's book. A title spelled in rainbow blocks. Thick pages. Almost a baby look, really. The recommended age is 3 to 5. Zoe and I found it in a dusty box in the storage room at Colvin Preparatory School. Mrs. Lemon, the owner, tries to make us feel better by calling us after-school teachers, but we are babysitters. The most teaching we do is remind the kids to not pick their noses during snack time. Our real job is to keep the kids safe, and at least somewhat entertained while their doctor and lawyer parents make the money to pay the tuition. The work isn't glamorous or interesting, but for a part-time job, the pay is good. Private school and all. There were only a handful of kids today. Mrs. Lemon said it was a popular week for vacations. Seeking to make the most of her money, Mrs. Lemon assigned me and Zoe to clean out the storage closet, while she watched the children. We weren't sorry. Cleaning out the closet was easier than corralling the kids. The hardest part was not choking on the dust. Even in the dark closet, we could see the thick gray blankets of dust on the cluttered shelves. "Can you turn on the light, Hooper?" Zoe asked. I flicked the switch. Nothing happened. "Hooper." "Sorry, I did." I looked up to see an empty socket. "Well?" I gave Zoe a nervous look. "Don't say that. Mrs. Lemon might hear you. Zoe is the best part of the job. I don't want her to get fired." "That's right. I wouldn't want to lose the chance of a lifetime." I tried to not let her see my dopey grin. "We better get started." I ripped open a box. Its cardboard was soft with age. Manila folders filled with what looked like old personnel records. "Box of junk here." I looked back to see Zoe playing on her phone. I coughed to encourage her to get to work. "What about you?" She sighed and started to tear open the box closest to her. It was a smaller box about the shape of a pizza box. It sat crooked on a bigger box like someone had thrown it in the closet in a hurry. "Well, let's see." She tossed the strip of cardboard into the shadows and pulled out the book. From the fluorescent light in the hallway behind us, I could just see its cover. It showed a papier-mâché sun behind a platinum blonde girl smiling in a pink dress. Or it was supposed to be a girl. Walking over to Zoe to look at the book more closely, I saw it was actually a grown woman. She looked like a girl because she had sharp circles of blush on her cheeks and stone-stiff pigtails on her shoulders. Her toothy smile looked like it hurt. "What the hell?" I asked. Zoe didn't seem to notice how wrong the book was. She laughed at it like it was a tacky knick-knack. "Oh man, how long do you think this has been here? It's probably older than Mrs. Lemon." Put it down. Let's get back to work." Hold on, we have to read it." She sat down on a box and gestured for me to sit in front of her. I sat. I have never been able to tell a girl no. "Okay, quick." Zoe started to read like she was back in the classroom, trying to calm down a mob of kids. She turned the cover towards me with a dramatic flare. I looked away. The woman's smile was too bright. The National Television Network presents Sunny Sandy. I should have ripped the book from her hands right then. Meet Sunny Sandy. Sunny Sandy lives in Sunnyside Square, where the sun can never stop shining. Sunny Sandy is a good girl. She is always sunny. She is never sad, or angry, or tired, or hungry, or scared. That would be bad. Sunny Sandy is a good girl. She is always sunny. Always. By the time Zoe read always, The hairs on my neck were standing straight. I breathed a sigh of relief when she closed the book. I expected to see her sharing my fear, or, knowing Zoe, maybe rolling her eyes. I did not expect her smile. "How precious," she cooed. "Wasn't that precious?" Her eyes were harsh rays of sun beating down on me. I stood up to escape the heat. "Not particularly. Let's get back to work." I went to take the book from her. She held it tight. "Now, don't be silly, Hooper. We're going to read it again." She took my hand and tried to drag me back to the ground in front of her. The iron of her smile matched the iron of her grip. "Like hell." I snatched the book away from her. When she tried to hold on to it, she fell backwards over the box she had been sitting on. In the cramped closet, there wasn't enough space between her head and the wooden shelf. Her head cracked on one of the crossbeams on her way down. I dropped the book and rushed over to her. She was lying in a slump between the box and the shelf. Her arms and legs were stuck up like she was an insect on its back. Blood rushed from the crack of the back of her head. I couldn't see the wound, but the red pool told me it had to be deep. Through all that, she held her smile. "Come on," I shouted. I lifted her into my arms. "We have to get you to the hospital." Her voice was perfectly calm. "Thank you, Hooper. That's very kind of you." I took her to Mrs. Lemon, who drove her to the hospital. Between the crack on the wood, and when I laid her in the passenger seat of Mrs. Lemon's pickup truck, Zoe never stopped beaming. I watched the kids until their parents came for them. I played pretend with them to stop my mind from imagining what might be happening to Zoe. I didn't want to go home at the end of the day. I still hadn't heard anything, and I wasn't ready to be alone with my thoughts. Procrastinating, I went back to the storage closet. Standing in the hallway light, I saw the woman smiling up at me. I thought back to what Zoe had said. We're going to read it again. This book had broken my friend, but how? It was just a kid's book. I opened it. The first few pages were as boring as any other kid's book from the 90s. Pictures of the woman walking through a cartoon town square, then down a brick main street. Then they turned wrong. On the page with the words, "She is never sad," the woman stood over a striped cat with a collar that said, "Mr. Tiger." The cat was dead. Another picture showed her sitting in a country church pew, beside a woman dressed in black. In another, she sat in a closet smaller than the storage closet around me. It looked like she had not bathed or been outside in days. On the last page, the one with the words, "She is always sunny, always," the woman was lying in a coffin. She still wore pigtails in her hair, and she still smiled, the same smile I had seen on Zoe's bloody face. I feel like Sunny Sandy is inside me now. She's watching me to see if I behave. I'm not sure how long she'll let me write freely, so I wanted to post this here where I know people will see it. I wish I was fighting back tears, or a scream, but if you were looking at me, you'd think I was reading a love letter from Zoe. I look peaceful. I am scared, very scared. Happy Hooper is a good boy. He is always happy. Always. It started a week ago when I got a notification on Instagram about a new follower. I got random requests all the time, so it didn't stand out at first. The username was Optimus.Prime33. Not exactly subtle, not exactly human. No profile picture, no posts, no bio. Following exactly one person. Me. I didn't follow back, obviously. I don't follow empty accounts unless I know the person, and I didn't know this one. Actually, I didn't know anything about this one. 0 mutuals, 0 footprint, 0 reason to exist. I remember looking at the picture for a total of 3 seconds and thinking, bot, closed the app and moved on. End of story. Or so I thought. The next morning I woke up, brushed my teeth, made the same coffee I drink every day, and sat on my sofa replying to boring work messages. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Optimus.prime33 mentioned you in a post. I rolled my eyes, thinking it was probably some spam reel tagging random people. Opened it anyway. It wasn't a reel. It was a photo, a picture of my building. My building. Not a stock photo. Not something anyone could Google. My actual building, taken from the street. The angle was unmistakable. My floor, my balcony railing, the light from my bedroom window, everything. Caption, you're still here. I remember sitting there staring at my phone thinking, who is this? I clicked the profile again. Still private. Still no posts except this one. Still following just me. Still no followers. It felt like a blank mask staring back. I tried blocking him. Instagram behaved like it would. User blocked. But when I refreshed the page, the account was still there. Nothing changed. I tried again. Same thing. The account clung to me like glue. I shrugged it off and went to work because honestly, I wasn't about to lose my day over some idiot with a Transformers username. Later that afternoon, another notification. Another tag. This time it was a picture of me, walking to the lift. Taken from the lobby. The lobby was empty when I left my apartment. I'm not imagining that. I didn't see anyone standing near the stairs or pretending to scroll by the wall. It was dead quiet, but the photo was taken from the corner, the exact opposite corner from where I was walking. The caption said, "You don't notice anything." That pissed me off more than it scared me. I commented under the post, "Who are you?" He replied instantly. Not a second of delay. Just a smiley face. I felt the hair on my arms rise. I don't know why that stupid smiley hit so hard, but it did. Something about the way he responded so fast. Like he was waiting for me to ask. I clicked unfollow out of pure irritation. All his posts vanished instantly. Like his profile wiped itself clean the moment I cut the link. When I followed again to check, he accepted immediately. No delay. Almost like he had been staring at his screen waiting for me to click the button. 2 days later, I woke up early from work. Earlier than usual because I had a meeting I didn't want to be late for, and I found another tag. A screenshot. My old Facebook profile. Like ancient old. Photos from college, cringe moments I'd forgotten I posted. People I don't even speak to anymore. He scraped something from an era of my life I barely remember and posted it like some kind of digital trophy. Caption, always liked this one. Liked what? The picture? Me? The life I had back then? I didn't know, and honestly, I didn't want to think about it. I started to get uneasy. Not terrified yet, just annoyed and unsettled. Like when you know a mosquito is in your room but you can't find it. Yesterday it escalated. I left work, walked toward my bike parked near the gate like always, and my phone buzzed. Another tag. A picture of my bike, same angle I see it from when I walk up to it, taken moments before I got there. I scanned the area thinking maybe some idiot from the office was messing with me, but nobody was standing around. Nobody was hiding behind cars or pillars. It was just empty. Caption, you really don't know me. Yeah, I don't. And that was the problem. Last night I sat on my couch for 2 straight hours scrolling through my memories trying to place him. School? No. College? No. Office? Definitely not. A friend of a friend? Nothing. A random neighbor? No. Someone I pissed off years ago? No idea. There was nothing. No connection, no shared history, no reason this guy should know anything about me. This morning, things got real. About 40 minutes ago, he posted a picture of my doorbell. My nameplate, up close, clear as daylight. He had stood right there. Caption, "Back home soon?" That was it for me. I grabbed my keys, grabbed my phone, didn't even check if the door was locked. Just walked straight out. Didn't call anyone, didn't tell anyone. Just walked fast and didn't look back. I must have reached the police station in 5 minutes flat. Probably broke a walking speed record. And now I'm sitting in this crappy plastic chair with people screaming down the hall and constables walking past without making eye contact. The fan above me is rattling like it's about to fall. My palms are sweating. And I'm typing all of this out because I haven't figured out how to explain this without sounding insane. Hi, sir. Some guy with a Transformers username is tagging me in pictures of my balcony. Yeah, great. Sounds normal. I opened Instagram to check if he posted anything new. Nothing. The same set of posts, arranged neatly like a timeline of creeping dread. I tapped each one again. My balcony, me near the lift, my old Facebook profile, my bike, my doorbell. I zoomed into each picture trying to find clues. Reflections, shadows, footprints, corners, anything. There was nothing. Whoever took these photos was careful. Too careful. I checked the timestamps. They lined up with my routine, almost perfectly. Morning, afternoon, post-work, late evening. This guy knew my schedule. I even checked the metadata on the photos. Instagram strips, most of it. But I checked anyway. Nothing. I tried Googling his username. Nothing. No Reddit, no Twitter. No stray gaming IDs. Nothing in any breach database. No traces. Like the account exists only on Instagram. Only connected to me. I even tried messaging him. Tell me who you are. No reply. I was halfway through typing a second message when I realized I was being stupid and stopped before giving him more attention. And now I'm here, stuck in a police station, typing this all down while constables keep walking past me like I'm a stain on the floor. I wish I could say I'm calm. I'm not. I'm trying so hard to pretend I'm not affected, but my chest feels tight, and I keep checking the station doorway expecting him to walk in. I keep refreshing Instagram every few seconds, and each time I brace myself for another notification. I swear I'm shaking writing this. All of this feels unreal and too real at the same time. A stranger following me everywhere, taking photos, posting them seconds later, reacting instantly when I unfollow or comment. It's too much. I'm trying to appear normal in the police station, but I keep glancing at the entrance. Every time the door moves, my heartbeat jumps. Every time someone coughs behind me, I flinch. Someone has been watching me for a week, closely enough to know when I leave my room, when I enter my lift, when I park my bike, when I unlock my door, when I panic. I'm trying to steady myself, but my fingers won't stop tapping the screen. My phone buzzed as I was typing this out. Another tag, another post. My hands are cold. I opened Instagram without thinking. This time it was a picture of me, sitting on this same plastic chair, typing on my phone. My shoulders hunched the exact way they are right now. My thumb mid-swipe, my leg bent at the same angle. Everything identical. It was taken from beside me, right next to my shoulder, like someone stood inches away while I typed, and I didn't notice anybody standing there. The caption read, "This won't help." I was 9 when Dad began to crawl. I remember the summer had been a particularly long one, or at least it felt like it. It was one of those years that didn't go the way you expect years to go. We'd had no rain since January, and the sun came out suspiciously early, though the temperatures remained low well into June, and it seemed to get dark far earlier than it should have on account of the fogs that would roll in each afternoon to snuff the sunlight. I remember the unseasonable weather was the only topic of conversation among everyone in our town. But that was the same most years, and the weather being wrong is seemingly commonplace everywhere now. But that year had been especially off. Memorably so. Especially since it also brought us the September when Dad began to crawl. It wasn't as strange as it sounds, at least not to us. We grew to accept this new way of things quite readily. That was just something he did now. My dad was prone to change, though perhaps no more than anyone else outside of the madhouses. Sudden diets, interests, and hobbies that disappeared as quickly as they'd begun. Changes in style. The hat phase, famous to us. And he was in a habit of growing his hair long before shaving it all off and starting again. A little less growing back each time it came, though. If you were to look through our family photographs, you'd be forgiven for thinking a different man assumed the role of Dad each year, and, figuratively speaking, you'd be right. He was difficult to know. Not because he was especially guarded. If anything, he was rather open and forthcoming for a man of his era, but because of his variability. It's not that he wasn't a genuine or earnest man. I very much think he was. But he was multiple quite different, genuine, and earnest men all in one lifetime. My mom would jokingly say things like, "That's the man I married," all 12 of him, whenever he appeared with a new look or hobby or deeply held conviction about something. It didn't seem to bother her much, which I suppose is a good thing. To this day, I feel a great deal of envy whenever friends or people I meet describe their dads, even if the characterizations are usually negative. Everyone seems to resent their dads, the drunks, the abusers, the evangelists, but they invariably knew them, even the worst of them. But my dad was my dad. I knew that much. And one day, my dad started crawling. I don't remember there being a clear point in time where he stopped walking, but nor was it a gradual development. It was a shift straight from one way of things to the new way of things. Dad crawled now. When he moved around, he crawled on his hands and knees. Not like a dog. He crawled like a human adult male would crawl. If he needed to move fast, he'd arch up and use the balls of his feet to propel himself instead of his knees. Everything else was the same at first. He'd still talk to us normally, still do his chores and errands. Although where once he might have been able to reach a high-up cabinet, for instance, he would now climb his way up to it if he could, and as far as any of us could tell, he still loved us just the same, and we loved him too. I don't remember there ever being a situation where I felt embarrassed by him, even when he'd go out and about in town like that. I was getting to the age I was beginning to be embarrassed by a lot of things, and I'd even started having my mom drop me off around the corner from school so nobody would see us together. For no good reason at all. My mom was a perfectly normal-looking woman who dressed normally, behaved normally, and drove a normal car. It's just that sort of age where you resist being judged on what your parents are like. What, as even young kids suspect, you'll inevitably become. Yet despite my ordinary squeamishness about being associated with my parents, I had no such misgivings about Dad walking around with me on all fours. I don't remember anyone mentioning it, no strange looks or loud whispering, and none of the kids at school ever brought it up, even the ones who would routinely wield any reachable tool to degrade and humiliate me, to make me feel like less of a person than I was. In hindsight, it seems very odd that my crawling dad barely raised a glance, though I suppose it was not the oddest thing about that year. One thing that was nice, refreshing even, about my dad crawling was that it seemed to have stopped him developing new characteristics. Once he'd gone down on all fours, He never found any new obsessions, never felt the need to change his appearance, never started exhibiting any new mannerisms or accents. It was as if all of that experimentation had just been a long process of discovery, trial and error leading him towards his final form, his final truth, that he was meant to crawl the earth rather than walk it. We're more aware now than we were then that people are often ill-suited for their lot in life, whether genetic or environmental, and that the only chance at contentment for many involves altering some of these things by force. For my dad, it seemed, this was the thing he'd had to alter. He didn't ever seem particularly discontented while he was vertical, though I can't definitively say he was happy either. I suspect the hobbies and other attempts at transformation would frustrate him when they didn't work as he'd hoped they would, and you could sense a certain lowness about him when this happened. Each phase would give a honeymoon period lasting no more than a week or two, before he'd either start to sway, gradually reintroducing prohibited foods, for instance, or outright change course quite suddenly. The shift from standard Protestantism to a kind of mystic scientism. Come to think of it, one victim of all this constant shifting and twisting around might have been his ability to have and care for a family. We were one of the few permanent results of a personality, a phase which involved him being a caring and devoted husband and father, and one which might have stood in the way of the drifts to come. When he fancied himself a writer or an inventor, I remember feeling more than ever that we were a hindrance rather than a blessing, or a core component of his own identity. Well, he never expressed this outright. It was something we could all sense, and I think we only accepted it because we all knew that it wouldn't last very long before he adapted into something for which we were a welcome addition. In any event, whatever discontentment he may have experienced in the course of all these things dissipated entirely when he started crawling. He'd found his thing, and we were all glad for him. I don't think any of us thought more than that of it until later, when the other dads started joining in. I'll admit that, like all 9-year-olds, I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have been. Any childhood is comprised of moments, really, a procession of abstract glimpses and impressions that can't be coalesced into a coherent story until long after that part of the story is over. I remember being confused when grown-ups would be able to talk about life holistically, interpreting things from the past and extrapolating into visions of the future. It might as well have been magic. And I suppose in many instances, it is like magic, or at least appears to have the same rate of failure as any other nebulous, esoteric form of divination. And though I believe I am able to recount the events of that winter in a way which represents the truth of what they were and the implications they might have, I suppose I can't be sure either. All I can do is try to remember the least of what it was. Something no one else seems fit or willing to do when it's brought up. Our town was a family town in the sense that people between the ages of about 18 and 35 didn't really exist there. You were either a kid or a parent or a grandparent. The kids would often leave as soon as they were able and stay gone until they were old enough to come back with a family. Who could blame them? There were precisely 0 avenues of establishments in the town itself, where you weren't under the constant glance of sensible adults. As such, we were forced to develop and explore our independence out in the insecurity of wilds that immediately surrounded the town. Scattered throughout the woodland were gravel pits, disused shacks, and abandoned vehicles. The woods were our town. We made it ours. Indeed, so complete a microcosm of society it became. Its own machinations, rules, and class systems were organically and spontaneously established. Certain landmarks held functions, and there were areas which were de facto off limits to those in the wrong circles. You knew, for instance, never to hang around the burned-out camper van if you weren't one of the Delaney brothers' crew. For kids my age, anywhere north of the mile-long creek, which ran through the densest part of the forest, and whose water was discovered to be the source of the unusual prevalence of ocular cancer in the town's children, was unfriendly territory. That was the area in which the activity of older kids would transpire: drugs, revenge, and nascent, fumbling sex acts. I say this simply to emphasize that there were essentially two towns: the town proper, where all the grown-ups lived their grown-up lives, and then the town outer, where all the kids went to grow up. Any man, any full-grown adult male in the town was a dad to at least one of the kids there, with minimal, insignificant exceptions. No need to expound upon the one childless man who briefly occupied the role of town librarian, or the childless male couple who lived together in the nice part of town. Neither were there long enough for it to matter, and your guess as to why they left is probably the correct one. Some dads occupied the sorts of roles you would expect of men in that sort of time in that sort of town: mechanics, locksmiths, store managers. But most of them worked at the factory a couple of miles away. The factory, known only and always as the factory, was our town's industry. It was credited with seeing us through several recessions and economic upheavals, relatively unscathed, and, as mentioned, with contaminating the creek that caused the unusual prevalence of ocular cancer in the town's children. In town, the factory was treated as unmoving and essential, a thing as the air itself, even less prone to variance, in fact. It sat just elevated enough that its lone gray turret could be seen from virtually any vantage point within the town or its surroundings. Although myself, and presumably most of the non-dad townsfolk, had never actually seen the entire building up close. It was sufficient to know that it was simply there, and it was there that most of the dads would go to work. I don't know what the factory was for, nor do I really know what my dad did there. From any discussion, form, or pay stub, the most I can discern is that he was a worker there. I never bothered to ask for any more detail than that, and he never offered any unbidden, like some dads might do. To him, it seemed, his job was just a minor inconvenience, a tedious and unimportant necessity to facilitate his true passions, whatever they may have been that week. But he never complained about it, and he never missed a day, even after he'd gone horizontal. As I said, my dad was the same dad he always was. If anything, he became even more the same once he'd started crawling. There was nothing else to him, nothing new for us to acclimate to. He just crawled around, went to work, played with us kids, and crawled into bed with his wife at the end of it. Only one time do I remember it occurring to me that there might be something wrong with this. At that age, and for as long as I can remember before it, I always slept with my bedroom door open looking out onto the landing. I don't know if there was any particular reason for it, but I couldn't have it any other way. And if one of my parents closed the door after putting me to bed, I would always rush up to open it again. There was nothing I was actually scared of, yet it would send a cord of terror down my spine as soon as that door closed while I was in bed. One night, I'd woken up suddenly from what must have been a bad dream, one of those ones so terrible that your memory rejects them outright. If you're just left with the dread sensation that you had experienced a horror in sleep, and it might have followed you back out. The wind outside had been pummeling the trees so the tendrils of their branches scratched against my window, adding sensory stimulation to my already overwhelmed juvenile limbic system. Instinctively, I did what I'd always done in this situation and cried out for my dad. I'm unsure why he was always my first choice to comfort me when I was frightened. On balance, I'd say I was definitely closer to my mother who, typically of the women in our town, had been much more present and involved in the key stages of my emotional upbringing, and certainly was my first port of call in any other emotional or physical state. But when it came to being frightened, it had to be Dad. Perhaps it was because I had never seen him frightened by anything himself, and I knew he'd always come. Sure enough, it wasn't long before I heard the clumsy thump of limbs on their bedroom carpet, then the frantic patter of his hands slapping against the hardwood floor as he approached my door. It was then that I got the deep, distinct impression that something was wrong, deeper than the sensation whatever nightmare I'd had already stirred within me. The sound of my dad approaching, the sound that would typically comfort me in a state like this, was making me more terrified than I'd ever been. I don't have words to begin explaining how much I utterly dreaded seeing him crawl past the doorway and into my vision. I closed my eyes tight right as the slapping sounds of his palms whacking themselves against the floor came closer and then stopped. Silence now. He must have been outside my room, looking at me. I couldn't bear to open my eyes. I knew it was just Dad. I knew it would be the same Dad I saw every day. I was even used to Dad crawling. It never disturbed me in the slightest, but at that moment, I couldn't imagine anything more horrifying than what I knew I would see in that doorway if I were to open my eyes. He remained silent. I remained silent as well, stifling the sharp, panicked breaths that were trying to burst out of my chest. I wanted nothing more than to hear those same thumps and thwacks of limb upon wood, retreating back to his bedroom. I couldn't explain nor rationalize it to myself. I simply wanted him gone. But still there was silence. For how long, I could not say. Too long. My eyes instinctively wanted to open a little to see what was going on, but I forced them to remain firmly shut. I was locked in, suffused with the most primal, physical fear I'd ever known up to that point, and remained that way until my eyes suddenly sprang open to reveal an empty room and an empty hallway, bathed in the morning light. The impact soon faded as with any nightmare, and I was untroubled when Dad came crawling into the kitchen for breakfast. But to this day I won't sleep with my bedroom door even slightly ajar. By late October, it had become commonplace for the other dads to crawl. As with my own, I remember this being neither sudden nor gradual. I'd first seen one dad crawling down the main street, a thermos clutched in his free hand, and simply thought, not much of it. A couple of days after that, it occurred to me that everyone's dad had been crawling, as if it had always been that way. It was a development, but not one that struck anybody as strange, wrong, or frightening, nor did I credit my dad with having started the trend. Soon after that, Dad became even more horizontal than he had been. He refused to assume any vertical orientation, and would no longer climb upwards onto chairs or into bed. He requested that we serve his plates on the floor at mealtimes. My mom never disclosed much at the time, and she says even less about it now, but I would sometimes be woken by sounds from their bedroom at night. Strange sounds. Not unnatural, but rather too natural. Sounds that I, as a child, could only imagine emanating from deep wilds or abattoirs. Eventually, Dad wouldn't even climb the stairs at night. I'd come down in the early morning to find him in the middle of the living room rug, prone like a sphinx. His eyes wide open, somehow even more open than when he was awake. Then he stopped sleeping entirely. By mid-November, the fog had been descending daily from the woods, became denser and permanent, and it became impossible to see more than 6 feet in front of you. Walking into town was akin to what I'd imagine walking through clouds to be like, with only blurry streetlights and vague shapes and impressions to guide your way. More often than not, the shapes you'd see would be those of crawling beasts, skittering in and out of visibility, their details completely obscured by the deep murk that enshrouded us. Soon enough, the fog had become so heavy and pervasive that it seemed unwise to go out in it, and we all began to stay home. All of us, except the dads, that is. The dads would still leave their homes every morning as usual, on hand and foot, with nobody driving cars around town. It became their sole dominion to crawl. Nobody knew what they were doing and nobody asked. We assumed they weren't going to the factory, which was more than 2 miles away through the woodland. An unthinkable journey to crawl, but it didn't affect us. And I imagine if I'd had the foresightness to ask questions, I would have squarely been told it was none of my business. In fairness, it wasn't any of my business. I would come to know that, whatever business this was, it existed far beyond my remit. That the dads were doing what the dads were doing is about as close to certain as I can be on the matter, and as long as Dad came home, I had no reason to concern myself with it any further. One evening, early December, Dad didn't come home. None of them did. They had left their houses that morning as usual, with no outward signifiers that this day would differ from any other, and they never returned. The following day, I remember accompanying my mom on a drive into the town's foggy maw, to search for him only to find all the other moms and kids doing the same thing, headlights scanning vainly for things long since gone. Even at that young age, I somehow knew, intuited at least, that my dad was never coming back. It took some of that growing and comprehending I mentioned before to realize that Dad had already been gone a long while before that day the dads disappeared. The next day, the moms organized a search party, scouring the woods around the town for dads. I wasn't allowed to go, so my older sister was left with me at the house. I remember spending the day staring out of my bedroom window. The only thing I could see through the impermeable mist was the factory's turret, silent, unmoving in the distance, the only constant left. When Mom came back that evening, I heard sobs, harsh breaths, and the frantic exchange of hushed voices between her and my sister. I wasn't supposed to hear, but I sat hidden at the top of the stairs and tried my best to make out what had been discovered. My mom has never spoken about it again. Any of it. Not my dad, not the crawling, not the fog, not the town, not the factory, not what they had found there. After corroborating with my sister, what I know is this. The moms had followed several trails, hand and footprints, coming from all different angles into the forest. Along these trails, they found articles of clothing, Dad's clothing, across the forest floor, although the clothes hadn't simply been removed. They had been bifurcated, precisely down the middle, as if carefully sliced off whatever was wearing them, and they were hot to the touch in spite of laying on the cold earth for at least a whole day. Gradually, the various trails of prints had begun to coalesce and meet in the middle, beyond the point they all met. About 1 mile south of the factory, they formed one single trail, one set of hand and footprints, the size of 70 men's put together, which crawled in a straight line directly to the factory. The very next morning, we left town. I'd been woken up by Mom around dawn, who listlessly told me we were going and we wouldn't be coming back. I barely had time to fill a backpack with my things, let alone begin to comprehend the emotional weight of all that was happening and what it meant. Dad's possessions were left entirely untouched. I got the distinct impression that nobody would ever touch them again. As my mom listlessly drove the car through the last of the mist, which dissipated as soon as we had pushed through the town's surrounding woodland and broke free of its limits, she kept her eyes fixed firmly on the road ahead. If at any point she had looked behind her, she would have seen the town swallowed whole by the fog, all except for the factory, which still stood tall in the far distance, glowing deep red from within, as if filled with an infinity of burning coals. Whenever I tell people my profession, they always laugh. A professional residential exorcist? I say, and they picture crucifixes, holy water, and Latin prayers echoing through cobweb-covered Victorian mansions. They picture Max von Sydow from The Exorcist, with his sharp cheekbones and unwavering sense of justice. They can never imagine what I spend most of my time doing: filing noise complaints with local councils, negotiating legal occupancy with unauthorized tenants, and explaining to terrified homeowners that the demon-scratching noises from their walls are just rats and cockroaches having a blast in the insulation. My name is Xavier Rexar, and yes, I do have a Master of Exorcism Studies from SOAS, University of London. It was a niche program, run only from 2009 to 2013, an experimental collaboration between the Department of Theology and the Department of Cultural Anthropology. I was in the last cohort. The program was discontinued afterward. Of course, a degree alone isn't enough, so I went back to law school. Nothing embodies the identity of a professional exorcist quite like explaining to a ghost, while quoting the 1988 Housing Act, that the house would no longer belong to him once he died. Yes, Mr. Henderson, you do need to move out, because the new owner finalized the sale 3 months ago, and the deed is in my possession. I've been doing this for 7 years. I've seen it all. Or at least, I thought I had. Then I got a call about the apartment on Bethnal Street. It was a late October afternoon, and I was in my office. Actually, an empty bedroom in my apartment that I'd set up as an office, with a desk, a filing cabinet, and a bookshelf filled with books I'd never read. My phone rang. Not my cell phone, but my office landline, which hardly anyone uses anymore. I should have taken that as the first warning sign. But hindsight is always easy, isn't it? I'm Xavier Rexar, offering residential exorcism services. I replied because that's what it says on my business card, and I'm known for my profession. Mr. Rexar? The other person was a middle-aged woman with an accent I couldn't quite place. Perhaps East London, but it sounded like something else entirely. I need your help. It's my apartment. There's something in there. I grabbed my notebook. Yes, I was still using pen and paper. Paper seemed to reassure clients, and pressed the pen. What's your name, madame? Arachne. Marie Arachne. She paused, and I could hear her rapid, shallow breathing. I don't know what it is. That's why I called you. The priests can't help either. They say they don't sense anything amiss. But I know something's definitely wrong. I can't go back. I've been staying at my sister's for 3 weeks. All right, Miss Arachne. Let's start with the basics. What exactly happened to you in that apartment? Another silence. This time longer. It changes. The apartment changes? Everything changes. The furniture moves. The walls are a different color every day. Sometimes the room is bigger than it should be. Sometimes it's smaller, and I don't know how to describe it. It's a feeling, like the apartment is watching me, waiting for something. I sighed inwardly. This sounded like typical stress-induced paranoia, possibly accompanied by some kind of neurological disorder. I learned to recognize these signs. Vague descriptions, emphasizing feelings rather than specific events, and an inability to provide concrete examples. But I had to pay rent. My services weren't cheap. Did you notice any physical symptoms in that apartment, like headaches, nausea, and dizziness? No, none of those symptoms, Mr. Rexar. I know this might sound a bit strange. I know you might think I'm crazy, but I'm not. Really not. There's definitely something wrong with that place. Something definite. and I need someone there to document it. Isn't that what you do? You stay there overnight, documenting everything that happens? Yes, it's part of my job, but I should mention that in about 90% of cases, we can find a plausible explanation. I'll give you £3,000 for 2 days. She interrupted me. Cash, half up front, half later. I stopped mid-sentence. £3,000 was more than 4 times my usual rate. Marie Arachne was either desperate or had too much money to burn. Perhaps both. Miss Arachne, this is incredibly generous. Why are you in such a hurry? Why is the fee so high? Because I need someone to take this seriously and... She hesitated again. Because I've contacted 4 other people who do the same job as you, and they all refused as soon as they heard the address. Please, Mr. Rexar. Please, you're my last hope. Her voice, well, sounded like a writer who couldn't write a female character and wrote her emitting a duck-like squeak. That's interesting. I leaned back in my chair, twirling my pen between my fingers. What's the address? 47B Bethnal Street, 3rd floor, right in Bethnal Green, near the tube station. I opened Google Maps on my laptop and entered the address. Street view loaded, showing a typical East London scene. Rows of brick buildings, shops on the ground floor and apartments on the upper floors. But when I zoomed in on 47, something seemed off. The building looked a little blurry, not very clear. It was like the camera was moving while taking a picture, but the surrounding buildings were all clearly visible. Mr. Rexar, are you still there? Yes, I'm sorry. I was checking... Miss Arachne, I need to ask you a question directly. Have you been experiencing any psychological problems lately? Like depression, anxiety, or anything like that? I don't mean to offend you, but these symptoms you've described can sometimes be related to anxiety disorders, etc. I haven't had a mental breakdown, she snapped. I haven't been hallucinating. I haven't been on drugs. I'm a high school teacher, Mr. Rexar. I grade papers and complain about the education standards, boards, inspections. I'm bored, and I'm normal. But my apartment isn't normal. For 7 years, I've learned to distinguish between 3 kinds of people. Confused people, mentally unstable people, and people who have truly experienced inexplicable things. Marie Acne sounded like the third. Well, I said, making a decision I later deeply regretted. I'll take this case. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow. I'll be waiting for you outside at noon with the keys and half the payment. Thank you, Mr. Rexar. Thank you very much. Before I could ask any more questions, she hung up. I sat there staring blankly at the blurry image of 47 Bethnal Street on the screen, a strange unease creeping up my neck. I told myself it was no big deal. Just another job, another confused client, an extremely ordinary problem. If I spent a night in the apartment with a carbon monoxide detector and thermal imaging camera, everything would be clear. I'd never made such a huge mistake in my life. The next day, I took the Central Line to Bethnal Green Station. It was a typical overcast day in London in winter time. The sky seemed to hang 3 feet overhead, like a wet blanket pressing down on everything. We get a lot of cases at this time of year because there are so many people with depression. I packed my overnight bag, a change of clothes, toiletries, a laptop, an electromagnetic field strength meter, a carbon monoxide detector, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and a copy of the land registry information I had checked earlier. That's when I encountered my second problem. Though I didn't fully recognize it at the time, according to the land registry, 47B Bessener Street didn't exist. 47 was a shop, a Turkish kebab shop. Above were apartments, 47A and 47C. 47B didn't exist. I initially thought it was just an administrative error, perhaps due to recent renovations and the system not being updated yet. I'd encountered this before. I should have turned back. I should have called Marie Arachne and told her I couldn't take the case. But £3,000 is £3,000. I found Marie Arachne waiting outside the kebab shop, but as she had said, I guess she was in her 50s. With brown hair streaked with gray, tied in a neat ponytail, and dressed in comfortable, slightly worn clothes. The kind of person who prioritized practicality over fashion. She looked exhausted, not just physically but mentally, like someone who had been under prolonged stress. "Mr. Rexar?" She approached me immediately, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming. I thought you weren't coming." I shook her hand. Her hand was strong, but her palm was dry. There was no sign of sweat or trembling. "You mentioned that other exorcists refused to take this case. Why is that?" It was evening, the traffic was bustling, and people hurried across the street from the barbecue restaurant and Tesco convenience store. No one noticed us. "I don't want to talk about this here," she said. "I'll show you the apartment, and then we can talk. Actually, before we go up, could you tell me which window is yours? That way I can find my way." She looked at me strangely. "There are no windows on this side of the apartment. It's in the back. Come on, I'll take you there." She led me into a narrow alley next to the kebab shop. London is full of these narrow passages, usually filled with the musty smell of garbage and beer. But I suddenly realized that this alley smelled of nothing. No garbage smell, no restaurant food smell, not even the usual London smells of car exhaust and rainwater. Absolutely nothing. The complete absence of smell in London alleyways should have been my third warning sign, but I was busy figuring out where this building was. The alley led to a small courtyard, one I was sure couldn't be seen from the street. A door was embedded in the brick wall, painted a mottled green, perhaps once the color of the forest, now more the color of pond scum. Above the door, a rusty brass number read 47B. But that wasn't what made me stop and stare. This building, if it could be called a building, something looked wrong. I'm not referring to its dangerous or dilapidated appearance, but rather its unreal quality. The bricks have texture but no signs of weathering. The mortar joints are too perfect, too regular. The windows, I can see a few now, facing the yard. They reflect nothing, just like painted glass, empty and gray. And its proportions are off. It's not an obvious error, not one of those "this building violates the laws of physics" errors of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but a subtle, nauseating one. Like looking at an Escher painting. Everything seems normal until you try to follow a line and find it leads to an impossible place. "This is it," Marie said, pulling a key from her pocket. She handed me the key but didn't approach the door. Her hand began to tremble. "I still have assignments to grade. I told you. I haven't been inside for 3 weeks, but you'll understand. You'll understand once you're inside." I took the key and examined the door more closely. As my gaze left the door, the wood grain seemed to move, flowing like water, as if the rings of a tree were rearranging into some kind of pattern, like some kind of alphabet I'd never seen before. "Miss Arachne, I need to ask, when did you move into this apartment?" 6 months ago. I rented it through a real estate agency. It was a very good deal for the area. I should have been suspicious, but I thought I was lucky. Do you still have the lease agreement? She nodded and pulled a folded document from her bag. I glanced at it quickly. A standard, short-term lease agreement. Nothing wrong with it. The real estate agency was one I'd never heard of before, called Perpetual Properties Ltd., with an address I couldn't see clearly. However, when I looked at the signature section, Marie Arachne's name, which should have been her own handwriting, was moving. The letters crawled across the paper like insects, rearranging themselves to spell different words. I blinked, and the signature returned to normal. Only Marie Arachne's name remained, written neatly in blue ink. Mr. Rexar, are you all right? Marie asked. You look pale. I'm fine, I lied, just thinking about things. Miss Arachne, go back to your sisters. Don't wait for me. I'll call you when I'm done. She looked both relieved and guilty, shoving an envelope into my hand. Inside was the first 1,500 pounds. Then, without a word, hurried back down the alley. I watched her leave, then turned and walked toward the door of 47B. The key slid smoothly into the lock, too smoothly, as if the lock had been waiting for it, as if it had been shaped to welcome it. The door opened silently. The darkness beyond the door wasn't the absence of light. It was the presence of something that occupied where light should have been. I could feel it pressing on my face like a spider web, like water, like the closing pages of a book. I went in anyway. Because I'm a professional. Because I'm a fool. Because now that I think about it, the house seemed to want me in. The door closed behind me, not with a bang, not with a click, but with a sound like a smile. I stood in what looked like a foyer, a beam of my flashlight slicing through the dim light. The walls were covered in wallpaper, but it wasn't wallpaper. It was newspaper, thousands upon thousands of pages, layer upon layer. The text clearly visible yet constantly changing, the headlines shifting with the movement of my flashlight beam. Local man enters impossible building, one headline read. Exorcist discovers he's not alone, another headline read. Xavier Rexar. He looked around nervously, as if checking to see if anyone was eavesdropping. The street was bustling with people. I read the third note. Below it appeared to be in my obituary. Only the date was wrong. The date of death was listed as pending, and the cause of death as curiosity. I felt my breathing quicken. It wasn't a delusion caused by stress, nor carbon monoxide poisoning. This was a fundamental problem with reality itself, and I was right there in the middle of it. The beam of my flashlight found a light switch. I flipped it, and the overhead bulbs lit up, but the light they emitted was off. It was yellowish and dim, like the light in an old photograph, and it seemed to stop a few feet away from the bulbs, as if afraid to illuminate too much of the room. On my left, an opening led to what I guessed was the living room. To my right, a hallway disappeared into deeper darkness. Directly ahead, a staircase led upstairs. I stepped into the living room and immediately understood what Marie Arachne had described. The room was furnished, with a sofa, chairs, coffee table, bookshelves, television, but everything seemed like a stage set, as if someone had read a description of a typical London apartment living room and pieced it together from memory, without ever actually seeing a living room like this. I walked to the sofa and reached out to touch it. My hand slipped through the cushions, feeling as if they were made of paper, because it really was made of paper, not even the kind of cleverly folded origami, just ordinary paper with the sofa's image printed on it, somehow standing upright, maintaining the illusion of three-dimensionality until you actually wanted to interact with it. I pulled my hand back. The paper crumpled, then straightened out. The sofa was complete again, looking solid and real, casting perfectly balanced shadows, existing perfectly until you tried to verify if it even existed. Okay, I muttered to myself, because only muttering to myself could keep me from screaming. This is good. This is a conceptual space, a place that exists as an idea, not a physical location. I've read books about it, pure theory. There's never been any actual written record. My voice trailed off as I noticed the bookshelf. The bookshelf was filled with books, hundreds, even thousands, spines facing out, titles and authors printed on them, but upon closer inspection, I realized they were all the same book, repeated over and over, with only subtle differences. The title was The 47B House, a study of architectural impossibility, by Xavier Rexar. Every book on the shelf was one I hadn't yet written, telling the story of the place I was in right now, my name printed on its spine. I reached for one, but my hand passed right through it. More pages, more illusions, but I couldn't read the words on the spine. A nameless dread gripped me as I realized this house was showing me possibilities. It was showing me the ending of this story. It showed me that it understood the essence of the story, knew I was involved, and understood its direction. Just then, I heard a sound from upstairs. Not footsteps, nor the dragging sound Marie had mentioned. It was something else. A rustling sound, like thousands of pages turning simultaneously, like the library sighing. All my instincts were telling me not to go upstairs. All my training, every case I'd investigated, every rational part of my brain was screaming that I should turn around, force open that door, and run until I crashed into something real. But I had already taken Marie Arachne's 1,500 pounds, and beneath the fear was a curiosity, the very curiosity that had initially driven me to study exorcism, to explore the edges of reality, to explore the boundary between possibility and impossibility. I began to climb the stairs. Each step creaked, not the creak of wood, but the sound of folded paper unfolding. A paper staircase took shape beneath my feet, then vanished behind me. The walls here had long abandoned any pretense of paint or brickwork. They had become newspapers, blatantly revealing articles about me. Always had. I stopped to read one. Xavier Rexar, 34, graduated in 2011 from SOAS, University of London, with a master's degree in exorcism studies, but the program was discontinued shortly afterward. Friends described him as a pragmatic skeptic. You would never guess he believed in ghosts. A journalist contacted his mother, who said she wishes he had gone to medical school. This was true. 5 years ago, my mother and I argued, and she had indeed said this. How could the house know any of this? How could it know anything about me? Another article, containing a photograph of me, but I had absolutely no recollection of anyone taking my picture. I continued climbing. The staircase spiraled upward, disproportionate to the building's external dimensions, each turn sending me soaring far beyond its intended height. I counted the floors, 5th, 6th, 7th. From the outside, the building appears to have only 3 floors. Finally, at the top of the stairs is a platform with only one door. This time, it's not green, but white. Pure white, without any texture, grain, or flaw. Just pure white, smooth, and absolute. I can still hear the rustling behind the door. Now it's louder, more urgent. I push the door open. The room beyond is unbelievable. It stretches in all directions, far beyond my sight, far beyond the building's capacity, and far beyond the limits of physics. The ceiling disappears into a sky that isn't a sky, neither dark nor light, anything I can't describe in words. And the walls. The walls are entirely composed of pages, billions of pages, endless pages. Every page ever written anywhere in the world, and pages that exist only in possibility, only in drafts, only in stories that will never be told. They cover all surfaces, layer upon layer, so thick that the walls themselves seem like compressed text, pressed together by the weight of narrative. In the center of the room, something was writing. I say something because I truly didn't know how to describe it. When I looked directly at it, my eyes couldn't focus. My brain simply refused to process what it saw. But in my peripheral vision, I could almost feel it. It was enormous. It had limbs or appendages, or extensions of itself. Those extensions were perhaps the limbs. Like the walls, it was made of words, narratives, and stories. But it was also alive, conscious, and perceptive. It wrote with something that might be a pen, on something that might be paper, and where it wrote, really submitted to it. I froze, watching it write. The sofa downstairs was now made of red leather instead of brown fabric. I didn't even need to check to know the sofa had changed. Xavier Rexar felt a powerful urge to approach it. My feet began to move, involuntarily pressing me forward, and I had to fight my own body to avoid crashing straight into that incomprehensible, living mass of words. Xavier Rexar stopped. I stopped abruptly, my feet dangling in midair, as if I'd bumped into a wall. That thing, or rather the house, because I now understood that the entire building was merely an extension of this entity, a materialization of something that existed primarily in narrative form. The house seized its writing and turned toward me. I still couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel its vast, ancient, and utterly unfamiliar gaze fixed on me, like I would on an ant crawling across my table. Curiosity, slight interest, a desire to know what I would do next. "What are you?" I managed to ask, my voice barely audible. The pen moved again, and I swear the way it traced the paper seemed almost mocking. A man with a master's degree in exorcism studies, standing in a building that shouldn't exist, conversing with something that doesn't actually exist. Xavier Rexar, a professional skeptic who simply can't accept the fact that some things exist without explanation. You're witty. I tried to think rationally, trying to apply the logical framework I'd built up over the years. Marie Arachne, did you create her? I created her image. As for whatever that image later became, someone who called you, or whether I simply recorded your memory of receiving that call again, doesn't matter. The result is what matters. It's all the same. You're right here. "Come sue me," the thing said jokingly. I stared at the words on the paper, stared at the nonchalant, almost joking tone, stared at the admission of all this terrifying experience. This journey into the abyss of cosmic horror and existential fear was just a prank, a joke, amused by some vast inhuman being, and clearly possessing some self-proclaimed sense of humor. "For you, this is just a game," I said slowly. "You're just teasing me, just for fun." He continued to laugh as if watching ants struggle. "People have died here," I said, the names of those I'd read in newspaper articles flashing through my mind. People who entered 47B and never left. "Do you find that funny?" The house displayed various texts to me about their happy endings. "You want me to believe you've turned living people into words." I looked around at the infinitely large room. The walls made of pages, and the entity that wrote reality. I made a decision that would be either incredibly brave or utterly foolish. "No," I said. The pen stopped. "No," I repeated. "I don't accept it." I turned and walked toward the door. "Xavier Rexar cannot move," the entity wrote. I continued walking, one step, then another. My muscles were under my own control. My choices were my own. "Xavier Rexar cannot move," it wrote again, but it wasn't in a hurry. I went to the door and grabbed the handle. Behind me, the rustling sound grew louder. "Xavier Rexar can't leave. Xavier Rexar can't leave." "Going home," I said. Then remembered I had a pen, so I wrote on the wall. The thing started laughing. I could feel my skin being rubbed. A warm sensation, and I heard something like a baby's laughter. The staircase behind the door changed. Shorter, steeper, and descending at an almost impossible angle. But it was downward, and that was enough. I ran, taking 2 steps at a time, and behind me, the house seemed to be laughing. The living room flashed by in blurry images of paper furniture and newspaper-covered walls. The foyer appeared before me. The front door was right there, green, peeling, and almost impossible to open. But I grabbed the handle and pulled hard, and this time, it opened. I stumbled into the yard, landing heavily on the sidewalk, scraping my palms. I struggled to my feet and ran down the alley. Without looking back, I dashed into Bessemer Street. Breathless and terrified, I reached the street. The afternoon shoppers looked at me with concern but kept their distance. I must have looked like a madman. Honestly, for a moment I felt like a madman who'd gone crazy. I pulled out my phone. Of course, it was dead. I checked my watch. It was still Wednesday, the afternoon of the same day I'd gone in. I'd only been there for an hour. I turned back to look at the alley. The alley was gone. Between the barbecue restaurant and the building next door was only a solid brick wall. No gaps, no yard, no door. On the wall scrawled in chalk, or something that looked like chalk but could be something else. Something between words and reality. "Same time next week, 47B. Below was a smaller line. "P.S. Hey, if you don't come, I have other options." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Inside was £3,000 in cash, the full amount. There was also a handwritten note, the handwriting seemingly changing as I read. "Service fee paid in full. The entertainment you provided was excellent. See you later." I went straight home. No stopping at the subway station, no stopping for a beer, no time to process what had just happened. I walked 3 miles back to my apartment, clutching the envelope full of cash tightly, like a talisman. Once home, I locked the door, checked every room to make sure it was real, knocked on the walls and sat on the furniture to confirm it was all tangible, ordinary, mundane entities, then sat at my desk, staring at my laptop for 3 hours without turning it on. I was thinking about quitting my job and going to medical school, but that thing would surely find me.